Hey, Intro to Psych students. My name is Ruth Castillo. I'm part of the IVC Introductory Psychology Project, and I will be your peer teacher for today's final lesson. One goal of psychology is to collect research on the effectiveness of different therapies, but evaluating treatments is more challenging than it seems. I'm going to discuss some controversial findings today about the treatment of depression. This final lesson, Lesson 8, allows you to bring together and apply key concepts from research design and mental health treatment, including experimental design, placebos, and antidepressant therapy. The lessons are a supplement to the regular Introductory Psychology or Psych 1 course, taught by Professor Cassens, Taylor, and Tucker, who volunteered some of their classes for this purpose. The lessons are presented by advanced students who are also members of the Psi Beta Psychology Honor Society at IVC. It must be noted that the presenters have no control over how the Psych 1 professor will award participation or performance in the 8 lessons, as some may offer extra credit, while others may include it as part of the final grade. Students are advised to ask their professor if they haven't been informed and how it will be granted. It is important to end each lesson and receive a score. Otherwise, the assessment screen will only show that you were online, but not your responses to interactive questions. Jerry Rudman is scoring any unscored lesson completions every other day and can be contacted for questions at jerryrudman@gmail.com. Please expect to see project assessment in the near future. It will take about 10 minutes to complete. The purpose of the assessment is to determine whether the project should be continued for future students. Your score will be kept confidential and it will not affect your final score on the project. Handout 1 is posted on the entry view in Canvas for Lesson 8. Please be sure to have it available before we proceed. You'll need the handout in order to do well on the 2 interactive exercises we have prepared for you. This graph that you see on the screen before you will appear on handout 1. Here's reminders from prior lessons that may help you in the following interactive exercises. As you'll see on handout 1, this study compared the effectiveness of 2 antidepressant drugs. The figure on the left shows baseline depression and depression scores after 6 weeks. The figure on the right shows, for each drug, depression at baseline versus depression after 6 weeks. A result that is p less than 0.05 means that the difference between 2 scores on the dependent variable are statistically significant. Technically, this means that if the study was to be repeated 95 times out of 100, this difference would occur. That said, it is possible to have a statistically significant difference between 2 means that is so tiny, it doesn't make a difference in the real world. Later in the lesson, something will be said about clinical significance versus statistical significance. Even statistically significant effects are not perfect 5% of the time. We think there is an effect, but there is not. This is one reason for replicating research. The significance of the result means nothing about causality. For example, if the researchers had applied participants to choose whether they wanted saffron or fluoxetine, they may also have gotten a difference that was due to some other third variable. So it is important to read the paper to see how the groups were chosen. Now, please take a look at handout 1 before going any further. There will be an interactive exercise number 1 for this lesson. Here are a few follow-up questions on the study you just read about in handout number 1. The study used the type of drug, either saffron or fluoxetine, as the independent variable. However, it's worth noting that all participants in the study were already depressed, and it was not possible to artificially induce depression in participants. This would weaken the interpretation of the study's findings. You may be asking why. First, during the 6-week study period, various events may occur in the life of each participant, such as a good or bad experiences. Some example being friend getting COVID, a relative passing away, an election taking place, breakup with a significant other, a new relationship, a favorite team losing or winning, etc. The passage of time itself can also be a factor. Second, the study also did not include a placebo group. A placebo would be some kind of pill, maybe a sugar pill, known to have no impact on depression. You will see a short video on the placebo research taking place. As you'll see from the psychiatrist, the placebo effect could have been yet another factor that led to lower depression scores after 6 weeks. After the video, be ready to answer a few brief interactive exercise questions.
The medical community is at war, battling over the scientific research and writings of a psychologist named Irving Kirsch. The fight is about antidepressants and Kirsch's questioning of whether they work. Kirsch's views are of vital interest to the 17 million Americans who take the drugs, including children as young as 6, and to the pharmaceutical industry that brings in $11.3 billion a year selling them. Irving Kirsch is the Associate Director of the Placebo Studies Program at Harvard Medical School, and he says that his research challenges the very effectiveness of antidepressants.
The difference between the effect of a placebo and the effect of an antidepressant is minimal for most people.
So you're saying if they took a sugar pill, they'd have the same effect?
They'd have almost as large an effect, and whatever difference there would be clinically insignificant.
But people are getting better taking antidepressants. I know them.
Oh, yes.
We all know them.
The people get better when they take the drug, but it's not the chemical ingredients of the drug that are making them better. It's largely the placebo effect.
Irving Kirsch's specialty has been the study of the placebo effect, the taking of a dummy pill without any medication in it that creates an expectation of healing that is so powerful symptoms are actually alleviated.
This is the placebo response.
Kirsch, who's been studying placebos for 36 years, says sugar pills can work miracles.
Placebos are great for treating a number of disorders: irritable bowel syndrome, repetitive strain injuries, ulcers, Parkinson's disease.
Even traumatic knee pain. In this clinical trial, some patients with osteoarthritis underwent knee surgery, while others had their knees merely opened and then sewn right back up.
And here's what happened. In terms of walking and climbing, the people who got the placebo actually did better than the people who got the real surgery.
No.
And that lasted for a year. At 2 years after surgery, there was no difference at all between the real surgery and the sham surgery.
Is it all in your head, or?
Well, it's not all in your head, because the placebos can also affect your body. So if you take a placebo tranquilizer, you're likely to have a lowering of blood pressure and pulse rate. Placebos can decrease pain, and we know that's not all in the mind also, because we can track that using neuroimaging in the brain as well.
He says the doctors who prescribe the pills become part of the placebo effect.
Clinician who cares, who takes the time, who listens to you, who asks questions about your condition and pays attention to what you say, that's the kind of care that can help facilitate a placebo effect.
He says he got into researching the effect of antidepressants by accident.
And I was interested in evaluating the size of the placebo effect. I really didn't even care about the drug effect, because everybody, including me, knew it worked. I used to refer patients to get prescriptions. I didn't change the focus of my work onto looking at the drug effect until I saw the data from our first analysis.
What he saw was that it almost didn't matter what kind of pill doctors gave patients.
We even looked at drugs that are not considered antidepressants, tranquilizers, barbiturates, and you know what? They had the same effect as the antidepressant.
Come on.
Really?
Kirsch was so surprised by his initial findings, he decided to do a second study using data not only from the drug company's clinical trials that had been published in medical journals. This time, he got data that weren't published but had been submitted to the FDA, which he got through the Freedom of Information Act.
These are the studies that showed no benefit of the antidepressant over the placebo. What they did is they took the more successful studies, they published most of them, they took their unsuccessful studies, and they didn't publish them.
So when you did your study, you put all the trials together.
That's right.
You're looking at patients who took the real drug and patients who took the placebo.
Yes.
Did they get equally better? Or did the ones who took the pills get even a little better?
If they were mildly or moderately depressed, you don't see any real difference at all. The only place where you get a clinically meaningful difference is at these very extreme levels of depression.
Now look, psychiatrists say the drug works.
Right.
The drug companies and their scientists say the drug works. Maybe you're wrong.
Maybe. I'd add to that, by the way, patients say the drugs
Patients say the drug
work.
works.
And for the patients and the psychiatrists, it's clear why they would say the drug works. They take the drug, they get better. Our data show that as well.
You're just saying why they get better.
That's right, and the reason they get better is not because of the chemicals in the drug. The difference between drug and placebo is very, very small, and in half the studies, non-existent. Kirsch and his studies have triggered a furious counterattack, mainly from psychiatrists who are lining up to defend the use of antidepressants, like Dr. Michael Thase, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, who has been a consultant to many of the drug companies. Irving Kirsch says that depressants are no better than placebo for the vast majority of people with depression. The vast majority. Do you agree with that?
No. No, I don't agree. I think you're confusing, or he's confusing, the results of studies versus what goes on in practice.
He says that Kirsch's statistical analysis overlooks the benefits to individual patients.
Do you have a seat?
And while he agrees there's a substantial placebo effect,
Have you been keeping track of your depression scores?
especially for the mildly depressed, using a different methodology, he finds that the drugs help 14% of those moderately depressed and even more for those severely depressed.
Our own work indicates pretty convincingly that this is a large and meaningful effect for a subset of the patients in these studies.
But even by your own numbers, more people, maybe twice as many people, are having a placebo effect than are actually being helped by the drug
That's correct.
in the moderate range.
That's correct.
And this isn't troubling to you.
I wish our antidepressants were stronger. I hope we have better ones in the future. But that 14% advantage over and above the placebo is for a condition that afflicts millions of people. That represents hundreds of thousands of people who are better parents, who are better workers, who are happier, and who are less likely to take their life.
Since the introduction of Prozac in the 1980s, prescriptions for these drugs have soared 400%,
I used to be happy. I remember being happy.
with the drug companies having spent billions over the years advertising them. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more women running through daisy fields
Absolutely.
after looking morose than ever before.
There's a lot of hype out there.
Dr. Walter Brown is a clinical professor of psychiatry at Brown University's medical school. He has co-authored 2 studies that largely corroborate Kirsch's findings.
The number of antidepressant prescriptions over the last decade has increased. And most troublesome, the biggest increase is in the mildly depressed, who are the ones who are least likely to benefit from them.
He says they're getting virtually no benefit from the chemical in the pill. Like most experts, he says these drugs do work for the severely depressed, but he questions the widely held theory that depression is caused by a deficiency in the brain chemical called serotonin, which most of these pills target.
The experts in the field now believe that that theory is a gross oversimplification and probably is not correct.
And the whole idea of antidepressants is built around this theory.
Yes, it is.
It's so modest that in Great Britain, the National Health Service decided to dramatically revamp the way these drugs are prescribed. It did so after commissioning its own review of clinical trials.
We came to the conclusion that for mild to moderate depression, these drugs probably weren't worth having.
At all.
Not really.
Dr. Tim Kendall, a practicing psychiatrist and co-director of the commission that did the review, says that like Irving Kirsch, they were surprised by what they found in the drug company's unpublished data.
With the published evidence, it's significantly overestimated the effectiveness of these drugs, and it underestimated the side effects.
Well, the FDA would say that some of these unpublished studies are unpublished because there were flaws in the way the trials were conducted.
This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I doubt that they are spending $10 million per trial to come up with a poor methodology. What characterises the unpublished is that they're negative. Now, I don't think it's that their method is somehow wrong, it's that their outcome is not suitable from the company's point of view. Because of the review, new public health guidelines were issued. Now, drugs are given only to the severely depressed as the first line of treatment.
Sure, yeah.
For those with mild to moderate depression, the British government is spending nearly $500 million training an army of talk therapists.
If you want to go a little faster, you can.
Physical exercise is another treatment prescribed for the mildly depressed.
By the end of 10 weeks, you get just as good a change in their depression scores as you do at the end of 10 or 12 weeks with an antidepressant.
Thank you for completing this lesson with me. Lesson 8 ends our series of lessons. I hope the rest of your semester goes well. Good luck.